the next panel on beating the bias. What are the common prejudices and how can they be addressed? Our five fine women leaders. Bhavna Imran, communications leader at Corteva Agriscience. Mansi Tiwari Somvanshi, head of corporate communications at Marico Limited. Megha Chaturvedi, senior advisor for communications and corporate relations at Rio Tinto. Mitul Lall, head of communications at Josh Talks. And Pooja Trehan, head of marketing communications at SugarBox Networks. Moderating the panel discussion is our very own Ameeta Vadhera, knowledge manager at the Promise Foundation. Ameeta, over to you.
Thank you, Anubhuti. A warm welcome to all of you. We are here today to discuss and share our thoughts and views on something that has been existed since ages, has been spoken about at length as well. There have been various actions taken to tackle the issue, but however, it still continues to exist. So today we will talk about beating the bias, what are the common prejudices, and how can they be addressed. So people are often biased against others outside of their own social group, showing prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping. And we commonly say that we should not label others, but we cannot help but do so. We naturally categorize people by their age, occupation, language, income, and many other qualities. So my first question is for all the panelists. And I would like to request all of you to please keep it short and crisp. So let's just kick this off. We are now in 2022, and even today, prejudice, discrimination, and stereotyping still exist at our workplace. So is it like due to lack of awareness, lack of intent, or it's like something else? So Bhavna, let's just start with you.
Sure, I can go. Before I start, I'd like to throw three numbers at all of you. 11 million, 40, and 150. You know what? 11 million is the number of pieces of information which is thrown at us at any point in time. And our brain usually processes about 40 at a time. So in case there's a tiger sitting right in front of us, even before we absorb that information, we would have been its meal. So typically what the brain does is that actually compresses all of this information. And it compresses and actually puts out a reaction which is based on experiences or some other validations, some of the previous learnings. And that's how, I guess, biases are created. So maybe we are not, we are not even having enough experiences or data in our head, which our brain can process. So, and hence it, ends up either stereotyping or bandwagoning or perception bias. So it's not that it's a lack of intent on our part. I guess we're just hardwired that way. Each of us, I think, as individuals, are hardwired to be biased about certain things. And that hardwiring happens not just with our own individual self, but also in our interactions with people. So if we have to change that, I think we're all well-intended people, right? I mean, we have to change that. I think it has to be a deliberate learning experience, exposing ourselves to more number of people, just being more diverse in groups. It just becomes that much important for us to be understanding what could that be and ensure that that data set for us is sort of upgraded and kept ready. And hence, so that 150, the last number, what I told you, that 150 are the typical number of biases which actually are thrown at us. So we have to ensure that that 150 is an updated number and not, based on some old forms of thinking. So I just thought that was a very interesting thing which the University of Virginia had done. And I thought it just gives us a very nice view of what we think of as a bias and not something which, is happening, discrimination is happening, not deliberately, but I think it's just physiologically also being triggered.
Yeah, that's a really fresh perspective. Yes.
Yeah.
Megha, you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with Bhavna that I think it's the conditioning of the society that we are in that kind of makes us behave in a certain way. But there's another number that I would want to throw. I was reading that in 2021, the venture capital funding kind of, surpassed all the last numbers, right? There was great funding that happened. But out of that, only startups that were founded by women only got 2% of that funding, right? So I think there is still that sort of a dissidence about if women can lead, if women can grow businesses, right? So I think it's not just about and I think it stems from the fact that as a society in India, right, we have been it starts at home, right? So a lot of things, how you behave at home, how you treat your women, right? I think that's why I think, and there's one more thing that, and I've observed that at my workplace, right? A lot of this, sometimes we witness mansplaining happening, right? Or there are instances where we've been told, hey, this is a critical sector, maybe women are more okay for B2C and not very B2B sort of an incline. So I think it's sort of a conditioning that's been kind of given to us, but I think it's I think high time that it should change. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It all starts at home. I agree. Pooja, you would want to share?
It's the most hilarious example I'd love to share. Uh, every time, and I'm sure Mansi, you can add to it. Every time there are women walking into the room with short hair, the conversation somewhere or the other ends. Do you want to try growing your hair longer? And I'm like, wow, that's such a personal choice. But that, and no way am I judging or insulting the people or not giving respect to the people around me, or but that's the most basic stereotyping that people often begin with, and it's just a style that we want to support or enjoy doing it, and that's the first thing that ever comes up. But what I like that Bhavna and Megha actually put forth is that we all acknowledge that there is this kind of discrimination, stereotyping that happens. We acknowledge and we are aware of it, but do we acknowledge and work towards the change? I think if it starts in our head, we are the ones who need to go out and say that, yeah, I mean, that was something else, but every piece of life with us needs to have a different perspective. So I'm going to leave everybody with a, I mean, not leave rather, but in this whole first response in a piece saying that, can we start a new conspiracy theory where I literally tell people who are stereotyping us, let's get into a code of curiosity. What's the question? What's happening with you all? Why do you want to even bucket us into certain segments? I mean, we have 6 beautiful, awesome women on a panel. We're talking about it. And I want to then go back to the men and say that join us, come on these panels and be our advocates and say that there is some change that we need in life. I mean, all of us are aware of all of this. We've acknowledged the concerns, issues, need gaps. Now let's work towards it together. I think that's my piece on it to start with.
Right. Interesting piece. Mitul, you want to share?
Yes, firstly, thank you so much for having me, and super excited to be a part of an all-women panel today. It's 2022 and this shouldn't be a big deal, but unfortunately it is even today. And yeah, coming to your question, I think, Ameeta, I think, gender stereotypes are reinforced by conscious and unconscious biases. I think we all know that today. The fact of the matter is that the system that we are sort of functioning in today is built by men in a way that it benefits men more than women. And I think it's high time that we need to change that and really reimagine the way our workplaces are structured, our organizations are structured, and looking forward to delving deeper into this discussion today.
Right. Mansi, your thoughts?
Thanks. Thank you, Ameeta. Thank you for putting together this panel, and thank you for having me here. And let me now start with what Pooja said. So I agree, Pooja, and believe me, in my home, we are breaking this stereotype completely. I have a 7-year-old boy who has long hair and is many a times been mistaken for a girl, and me with short hair. So we are there, we are breaking that stereotype any which way. But so I agree with what all the other panelists have been talking about, that unconscious bias is there, and which is leading to all the discrimination, prejudices that we still come across in our workplaces. And I'll again go back to a personal example. This, my 7-year-old son is a super football enthusiast. Now, a few years back, he was being a typical 4-year-old, cribbing that he doesn't have friends who can play football with him. And I suggested that, a friend who happens to be a girl, he suggested, why don't you call her over and check if she wants to play with you. And his reaction honestly took me aback. His reaction was, "But mama, girls don't play football." And I was honestly surprised because, that's not the kind of atmosphere that we have exposed him to. We've been very, very conscious about inculcating, about building a very gender neutral, with no stereotype household. So where did this come from? This is again social conditioning, because he has seen in his friend circle most of the boys playing a particular type of sport. So he is again categorizing that. He started at this tender age, at the age of 4, he started categorizing people basis their gender. So of course we got into corrective mode. We spoke to him a lot about, how there are such famous women sport personalities. We spoke to him about, various other leaders, women leaders in various functions, various spaces. So, if you apply the same thing to the organization today, now you see that unconscious bias is being addressed by, I believe, each and every organization in today's day and age. So, identifying that there's an unconscious bias is, I think, a given now. But what next? I think that what next is the question that we have to address. Of course, so you have identified the bias. You have made and enabled your leaders, your employees to acknowledge that there is a bias that exists. But how is it that you can ensure that you give them relevant information? You give them relevant kind of exposure, I believe, that challenges those stereotypes, and build a inclusive, diverse workforce. I think that what next and how can we change this thing now is the key question.
Right, right. Thank you, all of you, for your inputs. So, moving on, I would like to ask Pooja a question. Nowadays organizations have experienced teams, ethics committees, and more to handle such issues. How can we ensure that such committees add value and there is no fear of hostility to approach while approaching them?
Thank you for actually addressing that question to me, because I'm very passionate about it, and possibly my organization saw that. I've been made like the chairperson for Posh committee, and my first learning over there was, why are women reluctant to even come up and talk about a concern? Fine, they don't want to file a complaint, they're really worried. And what was the biggest problem that I saw? It was women who wanted to bring the problems, probably discuss about it, but they were told back at home that, listen, you're getting an opportunity to get out of home, build a career. Don't get into any environment or situation that gets murkier for you. I mean, why would you not allow someone to stand up for their rights? So there are organizations working towards it. The only piece that can help over here is people who are either on the committee or your immediate leaders. Make it very inclusive for you. No more can you live in a culture which says it's top down. Nothing exists top down. It's vertical, it's horizontal, it's your colleagues, everybody needs to take that ownership. Employees often go through this big problem of moral injury, literally, like, can we say this, can we talk about this, can we do that? So the committees exist, and the employees should take an opportunity to go there, male or female, does not really matter. Conversation needs to be two-way. That's the only piece. And if anybody is approaching, we need to ensure that we don't tell them that, listen, you're going to be facing dire consequences, and so will the person that you're complaining about. Let it be more on a balanced view. You get your eggs in one basket. Understand what's the problem, how can we solve your issue. We'll see how the other person or the offender needs to be dealt with. I think if this approach is applied largely for any other problems, then these committees become more integral to everybody and everybody.
Right. I think. Thank you for such interesting insight. Thank you. Mansi, my next question is for you. We hear a lot about gender-based pay difference. So why does this happen and how can we avoid it?
So, Ameeta, I think this is one of the most talked about, and I would say a concerning area when we look at any India-specific statistics. I was going through the Global Gender Gap Report 2020 from the World Economic Forum, which says that India has ranked 112th out of the 153 countries. Now, see, understand, we already have fewer women representation in the workforces due to various societal, psychological, patriarchal roadblocks, and these roadblocks still exist for women like us who have you know managed to break this bias and enter the workplaces. So when the journey for two genders, if you look at the two genders and if you compare their journey, the journey is so different. So to say that the result or the outcome is going to be the same for both is being a little unrealistic. There are, and I agree, there are various factors that affect the pay parity. It's the quality of education, it's social dynamics, it's the culture that you get at a workplace, uh, experience or not that you have, which, and we have cases of women dropping out of workplaces at various life stages. So all these widen the pay gap between the genders. Another factor which I think is extremely, extremely critical, and we as women and we as women leaders can actually address this. This is our own belief in ourselves. Though we are seeing a lot of changes, of course, happening in the senior leadership in various organizations, but we need to be much more aware of our own abilities. There are multiple studies which have shown that the pay gap is actually further accentuated by the ask gap. Women tend to hold back when they are negotiating. They tend to not ask for the kind of raise that they would want to. And so I was, while reading up, I came across some very interesting facts. Last year, 73% of women did not ask for a pay raise against a 58% men. So that talks a lot about women themselves taking that initiative. And of course, then there is a whole lot that the organizations can do, right? Um, you can be more transparent about your pay structure. If I, as a woman, am not aware of what my male counterpart is earning, how can I expect to even ask for the right kind of salary? So is it possible to make the wide range of the pay known for all roles, for all levels? Another thing which I think the pay gap gets addressed very easily is if the organization start following a roll forward compensation strategy. So you essentially, your last drawn salary has got nothing to do with what you get paid. It is what you are going to deliver for the organization which defines what your compensation should be. So if I am mandated to lead, say hypothetically, sales for East region, then I am doing an equally important job as a male counterpart delivering it for the West. So there is no role for you to say that, if you are hiring me for delivering on a particular role, the salary has got to be the same. So I believe these are the few things that the organizations can do. And of course, lastly, not enough can be said, ensure that you invest in women leadership. Because various studies have shown the more the women representation in the boards or senior leadership, the smaller is the pay gap.
Absolutely. I think it made a lot of clarity to most of us. Thank you. Bhavna, my next question is for you. Off late we see some religious prejudice too. As an employer or team leader, what steps one can take to keep them at bay?
Yeah. So, Ameeta, off late, no. I think religious prejudices always existed, but I would say it has gone in a very interesting way. The journey of a corporate world and how the prejudices have come to play. I think they were long gone are the explicit in the face prejudices about religion, right? I mean, so you don't gasp at looking at some name or something like that anymore. That's not the prejudice which you see. But I think the prejudices are very minor. In it's almost like, if you don't notice it, it could just go. I'll just give you an example. One of my friends, he just got a new office when he took over as the VP, and he works in a media company. Typical creative guy. He wanted to do something with his beautiful office, which he had. So, and he is a big fan of poetry, Urdu poetry. So he actually pulled out some interesting Urdu verses and had it up on his walls in the office. And immediately next day, the HR walked up and said, "Oh, you cannot have religious scriptures on the wall." And this is a multinational company. And this is a guy who's worked in for about 20 years. when he told me this, I'm like, is this even possible that, the HR is walking up and asking, they're not even asking what is that script standing for? Is it, the guy said it is harmless poetry talking about motivation in life. If you don't even know, but then look at the stereotype, Urdu, religion, it is no. So that, I think that example for me just brought forward the fact that while we all want to and feel that we are very well educated, well open, and a lot more, I think, aware of what is happening in this world, somewhere back of our mind we are still that some thoughts are just not going away, and that comes forward, I think, in practices like this. Just one more example. When I was with Vodafone in the Middle East, spent some time there, and when I walked in, I was told that the customer base is, of course, divided into high net worth and category and all of that, but also they, every time they described the customer base, they actually put saying that most of the customers in this belong to this religion. I was like, why are we categorizing that way? So then the customer insights manager came forward and gave me a very interesting thing. He said, if I do it that way, when you as a marketing or a comms person are developing creatives, you're going to be sensitive about some of these things. So a Ramadan campaign is not a blanket campaign for everybody. So but that's a very interesting take on how a religious example could be, used in a positive manner. So I think it's about us understanding what these are, playing it up in the right manner, and not just sort of putting our foot down because, oh, we want to be an inclusive company, so let's not do anything. I mean, white is not, it's not necessary for us to whitewash all our thoughts and, just make them look very inclusive just because we have to be inclusive, right? I mean, you have to add that little bit of color where it is needed, but that color has to be very thought through, and the palette has to be, it has to form a synchrony or a harmony of colors. I think that's what is important. Uh, I have seen in my own organization here and in the previous organizations I've worked, a lot of times we do use, classroom trainings, on-the-job trainings to talk about unconscious biases. We somehow are thinking a little low about talking about explicit biases now. We think that, oh, religion and all that is a no-no, everybody knows about it. But I think bring that back into the modules. Bring that back into the modules with the current context. As an employer or as a manager, I would say that, bring some of these in the context of your current work environment and talk about it. And that possibly will help us break through some of these prejudices. Yeah?
Absolutely. I think that was a very fresh perspective you've brought into today's discussion. My next question is to Megha. So evidence also suggests that discrimination affects the mental health of an employee too. So what are your thoughts on this?
I think it's a very interesting question, and if psychologically also you consider there are two responses that are told to us, right? It's either a flight or a fight sort of a response, right? And I have seen, and even in my conversations with a lot of women colleagues or even friends, right? Most of us kind of tilt towards flight, right? We either escape the situation, we escape the conversation, difficult conversation, we escape the organization, we change teams, right? And one example that comes to my mind is a friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine. She has a young son of 3-year-old, and she was telling me, Megha, when I was about, like, when she was pregnant, she was in her first trimester, her appraisal season was around the corner, right? And she said, till the time my letter wasn't in my hand, I did not reveal to anybody that, hey, I'm going through this journey, right? Because there were strong chances that her promotion could have been held, right, for that year. And I think these are certain things which are actually around all of us, but we kind of, we take it as a hard reality and we say, okay, aisa hi hota hai, we will kind of go with it, right? So I think the thing that Bhavna also said is, we really need to fight. And with fight, what I mean to is voice out what's happening, right? At least discuss with your immediate peers and share your experience, so that, sometimes we feel I'm the only person who's probably going through this, right? It can be discrimination of any, sorts. It can be some probably male colleague kind of passing a remark that probably you wouldn't have liked, right? And we kind of, we kind of keep it to ourselves. But the idea is really have those discussions and be very candid about them, because this is not a disease, I mean, the idea is to kind of really voice out what you're experiencing, right? And it's not just to your manager, or it can be to your person who's sitting right next to you. And I think I have been very lucky that I have had male bosses who have had could have walked up to and say, hey, this is something that I've experienced, I'm bringing this to your notice, and they kind of understood, right? So I think rather than just going to flight, we should kind of look at the fight thing. And numbers also suggest that, almost 2.5% of the people, 2.5 times a woman. So if a woman is subjected to some sort of discrimination, she is more likely to go into anxiety or depression, right? And then that anger is actually then inward drawn, and we kind of have that whole accountability mechanism goes haywire in that sense, right? So we really need to have conversation free flowing, and I'm glad this panel is actually doing that. So yeah,
So relevant in today's time. My next question is to Mitul. Why are there such few women in leadership positions across industry, like even today? And do you think they struggle in such roles, or it's like yet another stereotype?
Okay, so Ameeta, I think I will answer the second part of your question first. I think women not being capable leaders is definitely an unfortunate stereotype that has been passed on for generations now. I think Mansi mentioned this, touched upon this briefly. In positions of leadership, women tend to outperform men, especially during a crisis. If companies with more women tend to even fare better. And these are not just claims. There are multiple sort of studies that have been done. It's been researched, documented, and the evidence for this is only growing, right? But yeah, despite I think all this data and evidence that we have today, women do have lower representation, not just in the workforce, but also in positions of leadership. And it's not true just for India, but all over the world. And I think to understand like why something like this is happening, we need to also reflect on the experience that the experience in a workplace that men and women go through, and the experience is very different. So when men enter an organization, they have other male role models to look up to and to emulate, and they feel comfortable getting to know these male mentors, and they can see themselves filling into their shoes. They also feel what adds to their confidence probably is that knowing that their unique skill sets or their talents will be sort of considered, and they will figure out a way to contribute to the organization in some manner or the other. And I think for women it is very different. Right from the point of entry into an organization to actually making it to the top of an organization, there are multiple barriers that we go through, and I think that is how it ends up translating into seeing such few women in positions of leadership that we have today. And I feel like till the time, organizations, individuals don't really address it, and till the time we don't talk about changing, or rather, I'd say rebuilding this culture, I think the, organizational structure will not change. And I think till the time we don't accept women, not just at the top level, but really at every level of decision making, and as someone else also pointed out, I think earlier, that when we have more women in decisions of power, that's also when we have more women in the workforce in that particular organization. So I think till the time we don't become more inclusive and diverse as a central philosophy, I think unfortunately the landscape is not going to change too much.
Right.
Ameeta, if I'm allowed to jump in and share one small, adding to what Mitul just said, very, very interesting. There was a recent article, if I'm not mistaken, one of the business publications, as recent as Feb 22nd, where our union finance minister, Ms. Nirmala herself, actually went out and said that, even though there's a mandate to have one independent woman director on board for companies, they find it really tough for women to come on board for that. Now, there have been enough and more debates, if you pull that article up on social media, where women are actually saying that, listen, this is just a statistic. There are a lot of other responsibilities, and it's a give and take relationship. So you need to understand what are the hardships that is, actually holding women back to do that. and some actually gave interesting perspectives. That means there is an opportunity available. We need to just jump and grab it. So it's an interesting article. We should all just, just have a look if you haven't. So I just wanted to add to that piece. Thanks
I
for
don't know
allowing
how
me
we're
to add
doing.
in.
I don't know how we're doing on time, but I just want to add to what Pooja just said.
Yes,
Uh,
please.
personal example. I've been having conversations about taking up some independent director roles, and every time I speak to some mentors or some people in the industry, people who come to me say, "You're from communications, so double bias. Huh? You're from communications, and you are a woman. So what kind of industries do you want to?" I mean, I have to talk and give them explicitly what I can offer to the table. Would you have asked the same question if I didn't carry these two things? Maybe not. But then for me to do that, and the first 6 months, it only took me that effort to go and market myself. And because I'm a comms person, because I understand the importance of doing that, I was at it. But imagine if there was an engineer and if she was trying to get to an independent director role, she would have given up long back because she wouldn't even understand as to why are we hard selling oneself. So I think that is the prejudice at work, right?
Right. So relating to this only, what are your thoughts on positive stereotypes? Are they helpful? Like, I mean, a smart Asian man or a strong black woman, are these really helpful? I wanted to, anybody of you can
I
take it
think,
up.
yeah, I think because I have a sort of very resounding no to this. The answer to this is no for me at least. And I think stereotypes of any kind, right, Ameeta, like whether they're negative or positive, as soon as you start bucketing people into categories that you think, this is what they should be doing, it just limits everyone. So while you've taken examples of, say, a smart Asian man or a woman, right? Indians considered techies or whatever. I think another example that we often hear is that women are more maternal, right? And women are naturally more maternal. And I think the problem over here is with stereotypes, what tends to happen is we oversimplify. So when you say that women are naturally more maternal, it doesn't just mean that. It also, people assume that a woman being maternal means that she's less ambitious, she's less driven, she's not as competitive. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. So yeah, I really don't think stereotypes, whether negative or positive, should be promoted in any way. And I think it's high time that we start sort of, bucketing people into such small boxes. Yeah.
Absolutely agree. In fact, I feel the minute you add an adjective before a stereotype, you're just making the other person feel that, listen, I'm bucketing you, but I'm making you feel nice and I'm being polite about this whole insult. So bear with me. So I agree. I mean, if your maternal instinct is there, so completely you will become the more demure human being. And if the same woman goes out in the organization and is aggressive about proving her point, like how you said, Bhavna, going out there and selling yourself, because I need to tell you if you don't understand what my talent is. Suddenly that woman becomes like, oh, she's wearing the pants in office, she's pretty aggressive, my god, there's no there's no control. So there is nothing called as positive stereotypes. It just makes us feel more calmer for that minute.
There's this adjective that's often used said, oh, she's such an alpha woman, right? What does that mean, right? Alpha woman, if I'm going to voice out what I am, if I'm, opinionated person, you're such an alpha woman. Why don't we say you're such an alpha man, right? I mean, that term in itself kind of, I squirm under
Oxymoronic.
my skin. It's such a bad thing. I mean, yeah, so stereotyping is a total no-no.
Sorry, I have to bring this joke forward. I was watching one of the web series, says How to Get Away with Murder, and the protagonist is a black woman law. So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
lawyer, black, women, and then she's positioned as an alpha. So they have taken all the no's, typical no's, and made it into this one. But then that itself didn't sound right because then I was expecting a black woman there because they want to stand out in the show, right? So they did everything which is not a typical stereotype and made that into. So that is, I think, an example of positive stereotype of whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, boxing it to unbox it to box it, So it's like it's a
Mansi?
complicated
Yeah.
thing, but I guess that's what the world is heading out to. We are overthinking this a little bit. We have to simplify it and leave that simplified in our heads. We should not. The need for us to put it into a certain category will make us do certain things. I mean, keep it open. I mean, let's not put it into any specific category, right?
Mansi,
I
you would
think,
want to,
with
yeah.
millennials and post millennials entering the workplaces, there is no room for stereotyping, be it positive or negative. They are extremely intolerant of any sort of, discrimination, inequality. So, the entire concept of stereotyping, be it in, positive or negative connotation, just doesn't work for corporates anymore.
Right, right. So we have heard such great responses from each of you for this absolutely critical problem of our time. So I think to wrap up, I would like to understand some resolutions as well. So I'm opening up this question to everyone. Any one of you can pick it up. How can an employer tackle discrimination? So, how can proactiveness can be shown to your team? So, any one of you, Pooja, you would want to take it up?
See, the most basic response to that question would be to create an inclusive environment, which or everybody can jump on me and say that, listen, stop giving textbook responses. But in all honesty, it's just all of us being open to collaborating. Let's create an environment where we tell everybody, y'all are not sheroes, heroes, superheroes, supermen, nothing. Y'all are basic human beings living on this planet. Thanks to a lot of other satellite companies, you'll be soon going elsewhere. And you have other planets to travel to. So let's just be humans on these planets, keep life simple, collaborate as much as you can. An inclusive environment actually makes employees feel more engaged and happier to work with. So, day one, you have a new employee joining, make them feel special. I understand buddy programs and all of that organizations do. But the first 30 days itself make that employee feel that they're here for growth. That itself opens up a lot of conversations. So, yeah, that will be my solution to the piece.
Yeah. So for me, I think leading by example is important. The organization should lead by example, and we as individuals also should lead by example, right? We are a little shy to put our best practices forward. If you see a best practice, call it out, talk about it. It's as important as calling out a negative practice, right? So we have to be a little bit more open and kind to ourselves and say that, oh, this is a best practice. Let me share it with people. We have done this, what we call it, the safety pause during COVID. And we started speaking about what we did to keep our families or our environment safe. So in that way, why can't we do a pause, or we can do something where we share some of these best practices, some platforms. It sounds very, is it going to happen? But I think as we do it, it's just people want to then start showing off their good things they've done. And it just becomes a part of your ethos. And just thinking that that is something which we should do. And I, as a person, I've been doing that with my family, just call out a best practice.
Right. Yes.
I think I can't agree more with what Pooja and Bhavna said. It's not just about creating that inclusive workplace. It's not just about creating policies, but it's a lot about leaders actually walking the talk, individuals walking the talk. It's none of the policies can work for you until and unless you implement it the way it is meant to be implemented. So I think that is what we as individuals, as organizations, need to do, to realize that just lip service is not enough. You have to roll up your sleeves and get to it and practice it day in and day out.
Right. Absolutely. Megha, yeah.
I think I kind of really agree with what everybody has said. Just one point is, in my last organization, after the millennial board was formed, I think the conversations around discrimination came to fore much more, right? So I think the whole Gen Z aspect, they're very comfortable about speaking out, and they're not hesitant, they're not shoving it under the carpet, right? So I think involving everybody in decision making, and I think will solve the problem to the larger extent. Yeah. So
Right.
Yeah, I think everyone's already pretty much covered, what we've discussed so far. And yeah, I would just like to add that, from my experience of working in an organization which is still very, young, we're still changing what our organizational culture is, we're still trying to figure it out. I completely agree. I think, things like being inclusive or being diverse, these are actually, these might be, they have become buzzwords now, I feel. But I think that when it's a part of your culture, when your leaders are actually, walking the talk, when they're actually incorporating it in everyday behavior, that's when, these changes actually happen. And you don't need elaborate policies. I definitely don't think we need more things more laws, coming out or getting introduced. I think what we need to start doing is just sort of changing our behavior and, lending that empathy in our everyday, workplace environment as well. So, yeah.
Ameeta, don't kill me. One thing.
Yes, please. Just quickly wrapping up.
Yeah. There's one thing that all of us need to do is not only internally, but externally build a culture where we, sorry to say that, but we as women or collaborating with men go out and start helping. Start helping new budding talents to grow, help them, guide them, mentor them. Help is really crucial today. So, in whatever way that's possible, internally and externally.
Right. Absolutely. So I thank all of you for taking the time to be here to share your thoughts and views on this critical topic. Not only this was a great learning session, and I'm sure I speak for the audience as well. This was a very thought-provoking session. Thank you to all of you. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ameeta, for that wonderful discussion. Lots of takeaways again. Thanks to our panelists, Bhavna, Mansi, Megha, Mitul, and Pooja.